Welcome to Faith, Purpose, and Freedom. I am your host, Kayla Roth. This is a home where everyone matters. No matter where you've been, what you've done, you have a place at this table. Today, I have the honor of having Christine Dillard with me. She is the author of The Truth She Showed Me. She is on a mission to save and help and guide and love every single person who has ever been in a domestic or abusive situation. She has lived it, she has endured it, and she has overcome it. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Kayla. I'm glad to be here.
I am so happy you're here. So, I want you to just start sharing your testimony, just the raw details. We want everyone to know that they're heard and we see them.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll jump right in. So my relationship, my marriage was a 17-year marriage. We had known each other just for 3 or 4 months before getting married. So we moved very, very quickly from kind of dating into, oh, hey, we're married.
Right.
And there were definitely some signs in the early days that I ignored. I think for maybe a number of reasons. I maybe got to work on some of those things yet that really got me into a situation where I accepted some of the behavior. But um, it would be not even 6 months in where we had like our first physical encounter. And there was some pushing that happened, and there was some reversing of the victim in that situation. And then over time, over that next 13 years or so, things would escalate to a point where it was almost um, a daily issue in our home. And it was everything from um, in the early days, kind of just nitpicking things about me, the way I looked, the weight, the hair color choice, the clothes I was wearing. It would evolve and it would turn into ruining holidays. There was a fight before every big moment I had, whether it was a promotion or a birthday or Mother's Day. And it was just kind of this series of things that would happen. And by themselves, when it's one isolated thing, it doesn't necessarily trigger the same response as it would if you had a broken bone or a bruise. And I think that's
Right.
why it was really, really hard to see in the first, 15 years or so I was married. Not that I didn't know that his behavior was wrong and that he shouldn't be screaming at me on a daily basis and that I shouldn't, brace when he walks in the door, that I shouldn't have to be the one proactively solving all of the potential problems that could exist just to keep his mood level. I
Yeah.
did know that those things weren't necessarily normal, but when you look at, again, those instances where it's like one here, one there, it gets really easy to start telling yourself, "Oh, he had a bad day," or, "Oh, he doesn't like that job," or, "The company's not good to him," or, you can come up with a number of excuses, right?
Right.
And you start to live those excuses. So you start to basically lie to yourself, and now you form this narrative that you now believe, and it's part of the identity of your relationship and who the both of you are. And it would be year 14 before I really 13, 14 before I really started to acknowledge um, that I wasn't happy and that I needed something different, but I still wasn't really at the point where I was going to say I'm being abused or this is coercive control or I just wasn't ready yet. It would be
Yeah.
on the other side of the marriage after the divorce where that was really recognized.
Right. And the thing is I think about it and I think a lot of us grew up. I mean, the more people I talk to, it's just natural that we feel like we're the healers and that we can just solve everything.
Yes.
And you want to love everyone. I always try to, and my husband would always say, you could literally find the gold in a pile of crap. And it's true for me. I've always been that person that has always seen everyone through the finished work of the cross. The problem was I didn't set those boundaries to protect myself. So I seen them and I just kept chasing them and trying to be the helper and saver. So I see how in a marriage that can just really evolve and eventually just
Kind of
be
snowball.
hurtful. Yeah. Like, so at what point did you actually just start to realize, like, I'm not happy? Was there a distinct situation or it just kind of evolved over time?
There was. I mean, there were moments where I was like, not happy, but I need to stay for the kids, or I need to stay because I don't wanna have a failed marriage, and I don't want the shame that's associated with that. But there was a breaking point, and it was, right at that 14-year mark, where it actually happened here, right here in my home office. He had been struggling at work, and things just continued to escalate, and every night he was coming home, it was just worse and worse and worse, and he came home in the middle of the afternoon one day, and, I mean, it was unexpected because I was expecting him home at his normal 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Right,
And I was like, "Oh, man, today's the day." Like, he got fired, he walked out, like, I don't really know, but there's no reason he would be here at this hour if it hadn't gotten bad. And for context, I like most, I think, households, like, we relied on both incomes.
yeah,
And, like, we were not necessarily paycheck to paycheck, but we definitely needed both incomes.
right,
And, at that point, we were probably about 50-50, maybe 60-40 for the split of the income, and he carried the health insurance. And so this entire summer, as this was progressing, the stress and the weight of being the one managing the finances, being the one making sure that the bills got paid, that the debt was taken care of, that and then I mean, that's like a component, right? Like, that's the financial component. And
right.
then there was everything else. And so as this built over the summer and it became um less stable, like, the anxiety built for me. And so him coming home that day just kind of triggered this almost like breakdown, like nervous breakdown, almost like
Yeah,
anxiety ridden breakdown, where when he came into my office and was venting about work, and at this he had not been let go and he had not walked out. He just left early because he'd gotten frustrated. So, um, in that moment, like, it was the first time I remember crying in years. I mean, years. I remember my grandparents passing away in the years that we were married. I don't remember shedding tears. Like, this was like a pivotal moment. I just was, like, sobbing because of the stress and the overwhelm of everything. And
right.
I remember him looking at me and saying to me he had no idea I was under that amount of stress. He had no idea that he was causing it. And then he said he would do better. He said he would fix it. He would do the things. And I remember looking at him thinking, there's no coming back from this one. Like, I know that you can't do what you're saying you can do because you won't go get the help that you need. And in that moment, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I cannot live under this stress.
Yeah,
And when he left my office that day, I started building a budget to figure out what I really needed to move
right.
out or to move on and to initiate the divorce process. I started like researching lawyers and things like that. Um, but that was the day the planning started. And it would still be 3 full years before I actually left. And there would be a series of other things, but that was that key, like, turning point for me.
Yeah. And, I just want to point out that, like, financial stressors are always going to be there. Even for my husband and I, we don't live paycheck to paycheck per se, but yeah, that financial stress is always there. I mean, you have insurance to think about. Let's just be real for a moment. You have food to put on the table, you have electric bill, you have a trash bill, you have the water bill, and so for years for me, we were stuck living paycheck to paycheck, and there were moments I didn't even know how I was providing food on the table, but God always provided. Um and I can remember at a point in our marriage where, and for the record, my husband was never abusive, but I took care of all the finances. He went to work. So in my mind, it was, I needed to make sure this was taken care of. And I hid it from him. I wouldn't tell him our financial situation because I didn't want to add stress to him. He was already working 10, 12 hours a day. And that was on me. It was just in my mindset that that's what I needed to do. And it wasn't until like I just broke down one day and I explained to him. So I can completely understand just that financial part. It is so draining, but to know, and it is. I think so many households live like that, whether you're in a good marriage or not. I think so many households in today's world live under those stressors, and so that's just an added stressor on top of the abuse.
Yes, it absolutely is.
So, once you got to the point where you were like, "Okay, I'm done," and the 3 years of chaos that led to that final divorce, what did you feel? What did you feel when you finally? Because I imagine you didn't feel free yet when
No,
separation
that came a
happened,
long time later. And there are still some days where I'm like, "Am I really free?" Because there are
right?
things that pop up, and I'm just like, "Man, you still have this ability to just dig right in." Um, I in those early days, it was like I really tried to focus on any of the energy that I had been investing in him, I was transferring to me. So I kind of had this unwritten rule, like if I couldn't sleep at night, I got up and walked. I like invested in my
Yeah.
health. And some days that was 3 miles and some days it was 10. It just kind of depended. But that gave me a ton of time to reflect on the things that had happened. It gave me time to settle with the reality of like, the fact that I didn't know who I was anymore, like, just starting to discover maybe some of those pieces. What do I want? Um, what do I need, like, in my future state, whether it's a relationship or otherwise? Um, it gave me a chance to cry in the dark in the mornings where nobody could see, where I didn't even have to talk about it. It was just processing. And I that actually still goes on like, I still use that time today, in the
Right?
early mornings. It's before the world starts, so my kids are still sleeping, like, the pressures of just being a mom and a human, like, aren't there yet, when
Yeah.
it's, 3 o'clock in the morning, so, um, there was a lot of grief in those days of the life that I thought I was giving, not just me, but my kids, and the future that I had kind of, like, set my mind on, the person I'd set my like, banked my future on with, like, there was just
Yeah.
grieving the failure of and I don't like to use that word, but that's how we view it. When we're in the moment, you
That's how
view
you
it as
feel, yeah,
a personal failure, like, I didn't make my marriage work, and there was a pivot at some point where it wasn't a failure anymore, right? It was a success in other ways for the rest of us, but the there was a lot of hope in those days too. A lot of focus on, like, what life could be like, even though I couldn't see it yet, I wasn't living it yet, like, I could, like, someday I could see, the walking in the door, the sleeping at night, not having the pressure of the things. It might be new pressure, but
right.
it was different pressure, and it was not at the mercy of another person.
Well, and I just wanna tune in on 3 things you said. So one thing is we often, so often get just comfortable in our situation, and we realize that what felt like our comfort zone really wasn't that comfortable anyways.
Mhm.
So it's okay to get comfortable being uncomfortable in a different circumstance.
Yes.
Life is stressful, pressures are going to come, but it's those moments when we just take them all in and we take them on and we realize we can overcome. And I always tell everyone, just think, what can I learn from this situation? How can I grow? Just tell me how I can grow. And, just start writing the things that you've learned and the things you grow. The other thing is you reframed, and I use that often. It's a great NLP tool. Reframing is amazing because oftentimes we look at a situation and we see it with our five senses. Like science has taught us, to only utilize our five senses, but there's so much more. And that's what faith is, that's what the hope is. And when you are able to reframe, like, this is a failure, to, well, that didn't work out as I had hoped it would. However, God is creating a new balance for me, a new purpose for me. I am growing. I am learning. I am going to make it to a new destination. You are just reframing everything you thought was a failure. And now you have purpose coming over here.
Yes. And I think that's underrated, right? Like, when you go through something like this, it's really easy to focus on all the things that didn't go well. And even when you get out, like like you sometimes we have this misperception that we're gonna walk out the door and then all of a sudden all this stress is gonna be lifted, right? Like I'm just gonna feel better. And that
Right.
takes work. Um and it's not a straight path. Like there is
It's not.
a lot of curves along the way where you're sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, like could
Yeah.
please just don't give me any more, not one more thing. And then you're sitting there
Right,
and I try to always say, like, okay, so go back 4 or 5 years, go back 6 years. Would this have been easier to deal with then? Would it be the same amount of stress? And when you start to compare those things, what I realized is no matter how stressed I am today, I'm still only dealing with my emotions, my behavior, like my environment that I can
right,
control and the my children, right? Like, 'cause they're kids still. But I'm not having to manage another adult's situation. And instead I get to feel my own. And like when you start to look at those things, you're like, okay, you know what? It's actually not as bad because it could be worse. It was
right,
worse. And I think it just changes the perspective.
right. And, it's so hard whenever we get stuck in those, situations where you're just like, "Oh my goodness." And you don't know you can't control someone else's actions and behaviors.
Um,
We can only control our own actions and behaviors. But when you're stuck there, you think you can. You think you can control it. You think you can fix it. You can and you want to be able to. And so for anybody that is stuck, there is a way out. Christine, kind of share a little bit with us about your book and how you started writing and how the enemy tried to stop you.
so I was probably just 2 months into the divorce process where I finally started to talk about things that had happened. And um, it was a result of doing some Reiki energy healing and seeing a therapist. And between the two of those, I got to a point where I could like just start telling friends and family bits and pieces. The reality is, I was still working through all of that. And like part of me had just like compartmentalized all of those things that had happened. So it was it was a long standing effort to kind of start working through that. But I'd start talking about my experiences, and what I found was the more I talked, the more people that told me their story, and the longer this went on, I realized that almost everybody has a story, like sadly a similar story, whether it was coercive control with a parent, a sibling, a boss, a
Yeah.
spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Um, it's there. And if they didn't have one, they know somebody who did, but they didn't have the words for what it was. And I was doubting myself in the early days. Like, was it really that bad? Was it really abuse? As I was learning about these things, I'm like, man, if I'm doubting these things and I'm doubting my experiences and I'm doubting about whether it was bad enough, um, my kids might do that someday too. And I was like, I don't ever want that. I
Right.
want them to be validated in whatever those memories are, because although
Yeah.
they maybe have experienced a different version of it, I want them to understand that I believe them, that I understand what they went through, and that there's not really any rewriting of that truth. Their truth is their lived truth. And so I started just documenting the things that he would do um that hurt me. And that evolved into like little stories, like 1,000 little stories, which clearly is not good for book reading. So, and it really, I didn't really have any intention of publishing at that point, but I got to a point where someone had kind of questioned my reality, even knowing, even being convicted and feeling like I knew that I lived this situation, that it was abusive. Even knowing those things, I still had one person question that, and it rocked me to my core. And I just sat down one day and I was like, I'm writing this whole thing. And over the course of 3 weeks, I wrote that first draft. And still now they're longer stories, but there's still 1,000 stories. And in the coming months, like I end up pulling it together as a book, but I structured it in a way that it's a really immersive reading experience. So it can be a little bit jarring for people, especially if you're living it right now. So, like, disclaimer, please take your time and skip around. Like, you don't have to read it front to back.
Right.
Go to the parts that matter to you. There's in the early parts, we're talking about the things that I should have seen that I didn't, that created the pattern. So the different behaviors that showed that his schedule was prioritized over everyone else's, his hobbies, all of these, um, his take on a holiday, all of these little things that kind of compiled individually, you might be able to brush them off. But when you start to see them side by side, you start to develop that pattern recognition. And then as we get to the middle of the book, I start talking about my exit strategy in that 3 years where I was leaving the relationship and knowingly, like, the different things that I did throughout the process. And then the back half of the book is really focused on the healing journey, the things that I did, the things that helped me. It even talks about some of the things that I've had to realize in future relationships, the ways that it's kind of carried forward and
Yeah.
pointed out a lot of things that maybe I needed to work through. But throughout the book, at the end of each movement, there is a series of questions. They're just reflection questions, but they're meant to help
Yes.
um, people recognize like where they're at in the process and maybe feel validation through this process. So
Right.
there's 3 sections in each one of those, or 3 sets of questions. One for the person who's living it and who's still like trying to decide like, is this really abuse? Am I really living this? And then the middle set of questions is for the person who's leaving, who's already kind of committed to leaving but isn't gone yet. And then the third is the
Yeah.
person who's already gone. And that's carried throughout the book to kind of help,
I love that.
yeah, add some structure to the thought process.
Well, and it just it hits every person. So that's amazing. And I just want to say while you're reading this book, and if you are someone going through it in the moment, oftentimes the way God works is when we open a book and we read it and it kind of hits your heart, take a moment to just stop and say, God, what are you showing me? And then start up slowly again. Because I have found when I feel that shaky feeling and my heart starts pumping and I'm feeling something unsettling in me, God's trying to show me something. That's called discernment. Rest in it. Rest in that discernment because oftentimes your eyes are just being open to something. There might be something you've experienced, and it may not be in your current situation. Often, I have realized, a lot of the circumstances we go through as adults started as children, and sometimes we didn't even recognize it. And it doesn't mean it was in your home life. Sometimes it could have just been a best friend that was very controlling and you weren't allowed to be friends with anybody else. I've seen it.
Yeah,
And these situations can add up and just pile up over years. And so eventually you're an adult and you're still living stuck there. And that makes it really hard to set healthy boundaries as an adult because, well, we're stuck and we want to be people pleasers. And that's where I was stuck for years was a people pleaser. If you were mad or you didn't like me, I was going to chase you down and make you like me. I would cater to you and it was awful. And I look back and I'm like, what the world were you doing, girl? Like, what is wrong with you?
that's
And
such a
so
good
you
point. The
oh,
people pleasing and the worrying about what people will think. Um, I remember like, what will the neighbors say? Who cares? And turns out, just so you know, the neighbors don't care. Nobody has said a word actually, as it turns
just for
out.
the record.
Like, nobody cares.
Well, and I often this is something I teach my kids. People are gonna talk. And oftentimes, where do they talk? Behind you. Guess why? God put them behind you for a reason. Let them talk. And it stinks and it hurts and it does not feel good. But in the end, if someone's saying negative things and derogatory things, oftentimes it's coming from their heart. Everything we do comes from our heart. So it's something internally with them if they're saying it about you, especially in a negative and derogatory way. And that's just like one of those reflections I had to learn my whole life too. Like I used to be very affected if someone said something bad about me. And there's still times where I'm like, but you learn to be okay with it. And you learn like happy people just don't do that. Hurt people. And it's unfair, but that doesn't mean that the hurt person that is hurting you, you have to be okay with and you have to just accept it because they're hurt. No, that means you can set a boundary. You can still love them. You can still pray for them. You can still wish the best for them. Doesn't mean you have to let them right here to hurt you anymore. So, what encouragement would you give someone who may be stuck where you were once stuck?
Um, the one thing that I've struggled with more than anything, I think, is, and I'm not sure I would have known what to call it, is I felt alone. Not only in my relationship, but because I couldn't be honest with everybody else about what was happening. So, even when I hung out with girlfriends or I hung out with my family, there was always this mask that was in place so that I didn't misstep and I didn't talk about their relationship because I learned early on that don't do that. Um, and so I never got beyond like surface level connections with people. And
Mhm.
I felt totally alone. And the thing I realized coming out of this is that I was never alone. I mean, we can go down the spiritual path, but also there is this community out there of other survivors and people that are either going through it or have been through it that are very passionate about helping other people. Um, and it's a little mind blowing. And you can do all of that. Like you can engage in those communities anonymously on Facebook, on Instagram, all these different places. So there are people out there who will believe you. A lot of people, a lot of people. Um, there's also a ton of validation in those communities because you see and hear other people who are experiencing the same thing. So when you wonder if it's bad enough, you're hearing 75 other people say that this was their situation and it absolutely is bad enough. If you're asking that question, the answer is your brain is now catching up to what your body already knows. The reality is cutting in that yes, it is bad enough. So the hope on the other side is one, there is a ton of peace. It takes a while to get there where you get comfortable. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you it's perfect because it's not. The panic attacks still pop up, the nightmares still come, but what you do with that and how you process it will help bring peace over time, right? And they become less and less as you work through things. Um, the biggest piece of advice I got from my trauma therapist was, and it was really just commentary, and she said, "You don't have to relive it all to heal from it, right?" And I was a little mind blown because I don't know why, but somewhere along the way, I picked up this perception that the only way to heal from it is if you go back and relive it all and say, "Okay, I've checked that box." And the reality is you don't, and that really, really set me free, from having to go back and continue to process all of the things.
Right. So I know you shared with me right before about TikTok, and I
Oh, yeah.
definitely want you to share that with the audience.
Oh, yeah. Um, so I found that I'm a little bit of an advice monster these days because when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I got a problem, I wanna help." And, that's, really overwhelming for people, especially in these situations, and I
Yeah.
remember those days. So what I've done is instead of, offering 100 different pieces of advice verbally to somebody, I've built a PDF version, and then there's a series on TikTok right now that I'm working through that gives bite-sized actions that can be taken to help move through the process. So, for example, one of the biggest fears people oftentimes have is the financial component. Like, I can't afford this. I'll never be able to afford this. And
Right.
that mindset is really easy to get sucked into. So I provide a prompt for that to drop into ChatGPT or Claude, like whatever tool you're using, and that prompt will start the process of walking you through like, can I really not afford this? Or am I just overwhelmed and think I can't afford it? Right. And then it will give guidance on what are the steps I need to take to figure out what the reality of this situation is. So
Mhm.
it's meant to be bite sized so people can kind of pick and choose which ones they incorporate or leverage, but it's also meant to not overwhelm. The PDF version has 49 in it. Um, so it's a lot, but it's all of the different things that I was thinking as I worked through the process where I was like, man, it would be
Yeah.
nice to help other people get. I didn't use AI because it really wasn't as popular as it is right now. Not that it wasn't
Right.
there, but it just wasn't the same. So um, it's been really, it's been a really good resource for people who are looking to just start, but maybe aren't fully committed yet, and they just want to know what the reality is.
And AI is an amazing tool for literally anything in life. And especially whenever you're just looking and you can come up with a plan and you can, I mean, it can help you build all of the steps and exactly what you need to do. And AI will also give you tools and resources too that you may not even know ever existed. So I mean, I love that because AI truly is my best friend some days.
Yes.
I
It'll help
built an
prep you,
entire
give you all the
website.
questions for the lawyers and, like, it'll
Yeah.
yeah, it can do so much.
Well, and yeah, and like that just being able to say, "Okay, what questions should I ask? What do I need
Yes.
to ask when I" it's gonna give you ideas because, whenever you get to a lawyer's office, your nerves are blah
Mm,
anyway, and so to have something that's already right there, you got all of the questions ready for you. You don't have to think of anything. That's awesome. I love it.
yes.
I love it. Well, Christine, I have absolutely just it's been an honor to have you today and just have you with us. One last question would be, what advice do you have to any professional in any room that might be sitting with someone who has struggled through these situations?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Um, it's maybe less advice and more perspective, but the reality is you're never gonna be able to get that person to admit that they're being abused until they're ready to, and I think it's our job as a society and as these professionals to help them see what it looks like so that then they can self identify. Because I know that if somebody would have told me back then, hey, this is abuse and this is what you're going through, I would have definitely shut down. I definitely would have probably isolated from that person because I wasn't ready. But when I
Right,
started to do the research and I started to learn the behaviors and what it looked like, I think that was the most helpful part of my process. And okay, so I got to see it and I got to hear it, and now I'm being able. At some point, I was able to say it, and then kind of move through the steps. But I think as professionals and as a society, if we can put more things out like this, where we can educate on the what it looks like, what it feels like,
right.
specifically what it feels like, because sometimes it's real hard to see.
Yeah,
Um, it just doesn't surface as broken bones and bruises, and that's sometimes easier to talk about because it's you can see it. Like we're
right.
talking about, it's like talking about Santa Claus here. Like we need to be able to feel it. And I think being able to, even as health professionals, like that, I want to go down that path for 1 second. Um, we walk into the doctor's office and the doctor says, "Do you feel safe at home?"
Nobody's answering that question.
Nobody is saying yes, and a lot of times, whoever it is sitting outside, right? Like, I'm not answering that honestly because the punishment is too high. So, we need to look for the physical symptoms. Mine manifested as initially, um, like, what I thought was anxiousness, anxiety, like, weight gain that I could never get rid of, puffiness in my face, all of these different things, and, they were over time diagnosed as PCOS and Hashimoto's and all of these autoimmune conditions, high blood pressure. So if we start assessing maybe the whole picture and not just the medical symptoms, we might be able to identify scenarios where people need help sooner. But again, it goes back to they have to be ready.
Yeah.
So
And
patience,
everybody is ready at a different point, and
absolutely.
unfortunately and this is with everything in life. I mean, oftentimes it's like that rock bottom where people
Yes.
finally are just like, "Okay," and they realize. I would encourage people just to ask questions, "Well, how did that make you feel?" If someone does open up to you, just
Yes.
say, "How did that
Yeah.
make you feel?"
Yeah. What did
And
you feel in your
make
body? Like,
them think for themselves because in coaching, that's one thing as a coach that I love to say to people, like, what do you want? Where are you at? How do you feel? And these are situations where people can I mean, sometimes we have to sit in silence, and that's okay.
like get
As a
comfortable with
coach, I
silence
have
real
learned
quick.
sometimes just to sit there and be quiet and let them think, and then they'll pop out the answer. And it's just that moment of silence of someone just being there with you that makes them kind of think. Oftentimes, guys, you have all the advice in the world, and oftentimes the person coming to you, they love you and they trust you, and that's why they're coming to you. The last thing they want is to tell you all the things they already know in their head. They they just want you to sit there. So say less and love more.
Yes.
I think that's important. Hey, Christine, I thank you so much for being with us today and just writing this book that is going to transform lives. Guys, every test you walk through is a testimony, and that testimony is gonna transform someone else's life, and that's exactly what you've done, Christine.
Thank you, Kayla.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for being with us today. Remember, you are worth it, you matter, and you always have a place at our table here at Faith, Purpose, and Freedom. I will share Christine's book and her TikTok in the comments and her so you guys can connect with her if you need to. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And my website is www.faithpurposefreedom.com. Never hesitate to reach out, even if it's just for a prayer. Thank you so much. Everyone have a blessed evening.
Thank you.